From the headquarters of Talasur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Thousands of protesters have marched down Sao Paulo's iconic Paulista Avenue against dictatorship and fascism in Brazil. The marchers rejected the first-round victory of the far-right politician Jair Bolsonaro in the presidential election. They are calling for all democratic and progressive forces to unite to defeat Bolsonaro in the second round on October 28th.
I didn't expect to leave this to my children. This wasn't what I fought for in the 60s and 70s. We faced the military, and now we have to go to the streets again because of ignorance, because of craziness. I feel responsible for this election result. I think all of us failed.
I'm very scared that there's a chance that Bolsonaro will become president. Our mission is to make no our answer, and I think we have 18 days to do it and try to solve the situation.
Meanwhile, Bolsonaro's medical team has announced that he is still not healthy enough to take part in scheduled television debates and other campaign activities. The far-right candidate, who is not seen as an inspiring speaker, has repeatedly missed the television debates.
He has low immunity, fainting, a drop in blood pressure, the need to be monitored, and to get through standing and speaking for 3 hours isn't easy.
But the leftist Brazilian presidential candidate, Fernando Haddad, has told journalists that he is even willing to debate his opponent in the hospital if necessary, hinting that Bolsonaro may be intentionally avoiding open debates.
Our fear is that he uses ruses to avoid debate. I'm prepared even to go to a hospital room to debate him. If that's what it takes, I will go to the sick room so that we can debate Brazil.
And the far-right frontrunner has spooked previously supportive investors. The Brazilian stock market fell Wednesday after Bolsonaro made clear his promises of privatizations and pension reform were a lot less ambitious than many expected. Bolsonaro has no plans to privatize the state-owned oil company Petrobras in the short term if elected, according to the president of his party, Gustavo Bebiano. And Jair Bolsonaro's chief economic advisor is being investigated over accusations of fraud tied to the pension funds of state-run companies. Federal prosecutors said on Wednesday the investigation of Paulo Guedes, tapped as Bolsonaro's future finance minister, has the potential to damage support for Bolsonaro. He has campaigned on a law and order platform aimed at voters tired of corruption. The third most powerful storm ever to hit the United States, Hurricane Michael, has been downgraded to a tropical storm after causing havoc in the Florida Panhandle. When Michael made landfall, it had winds of 250 kilometers per hour, which have since been reduced to 110. At least 2 people have been killed in the storm. A state of emergency was declared in Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. The authorities have urged residents to prepare for heavy rains as Storm Michael is expected to intensify again over the weekend.
It was brutal, absolutely brutal. The damage that we see looking around, I really feel that it could have been a tornado. Sustained winds, it was plus 100 miles per hour. Vertical rain, you can look around. Most of the shingles are off the houses.
64 years, and this is my first time I went through one. That I worked for the power company and retired, so I saw a lot of storm duty, but this one here was the worst I've seen. So it was good. You see what it did around here. It snapped trees like they were toothpicks. It was nothing to it. So I'm glad I'm still here. I'm glad I survived. I'm glad the car made it. Everything was close, and so it all worked out.
Hurricane Michael left behind flooded homes and streets. It blew the roofs off many houses and destroyed shops. Many vehicles were submerged in water. Powerful winds toppled trees, street lights, and road signs. 250,000 homes and businesses have been left without power. Barbados' Prime Minister says the Caribbean needs to stop talking and start doing as it relates to agricultural production. Mia Motley was speaking at the official launch of Caribbean Agriculture Week. She says the time has come for the Caribbean to make producing more of its own food a priority.
When it has become easier to access technology, when innovation is the buzzword of the environment within which we live, why are we failing to rise to the task against the background of the reality that as we go forward in a world fighting the ravages of climate change, that the two most expensive commodities that we face will be food and water.
The construction of a new international airport in Mexico City has been the focus of community protests for years. Now, members of the transition team for the president-elect, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, have begun to listen to the affected residents.
The green landscape that surrounds the community of San Nicolás Tlaminca has not been the same for the last 2 years. The company that is building the capital's new international airport has turned the region into a landfill of toxic waste.
We are in a natural protected area of nearly 8,000 hectares. It was created in 2002, and it was clearly stated that in this area there should be no garbage dumps or mines.
People in the surrounding communities made clear to the transition team that they are opposed to this project. They said it has only brought devastation.
Lago sí, aeropuerto no! Lago sí, aeropuerto no!
Mines and quarries, many of them illegal, has caused irreversible damage to the environment. It has destroyed flora and fauna endemic to this central region of the country.
The environmental impact study for the airport said there will be 16 mines, but in the reality there are more than 160 authorized mines, plus all the illegal ones.
President-elect Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador promised to listen to all the parties involved in the building of the airport, a project which has already cost more than $13 billion.
They tell me there is no provision for an inquiry in the law. No, there isn't. But if you ask my opinion, I would like to have an inquiry.
The local communities have stood firm in saying that suspending construction is the only way out of this conflict, which could mar the government of López Obrador from the start.
This project is causing a catastrophe, not only for the environment, but also for us, because the people who live here are not taken into account in this project, except as cheap labor.
Businessmen, on the other hand, are defending what they say will be a pole of development for the country. As well as the airport itself, they are planning a network of toll roads connecting it with the Mexican capital, as well as hotels and shopping centers.
We'll take a short break now. More news after this.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. With just a few days to go until the Vatican declares Monsignor Oscar Romero is saint, social movements in El Salvador are demanding justice for his murder in 1980. They want those responsible to be brought to trial.
The Catholic faithful in El Salvador, along with human rights organizations, unions and citizens in general, are demanding that a judge in the capital speed up the criminal case against the murderers of Monsignor Romero.
We haven't been able to move forward with the case. We have talked to the judge about this and he told us he has too much work.
Monsignor Romero was killed on March 24, 1980, as he celebrated Mass in the Church of Divine Providence in San Salvador. A truth commission set up under the peace agreements attributed the murder to death squads commanded by the now deceased Army Major Roberto Dobson.
There is an absence of justice for 38 years. The state has neglected the victims of the armed conflict, and I say victims because Romero is the first of those victims of the savage repression carried out in the 70s and 80s.
3 days ahead of his canonization by Pope Francis in the Vatican, the plaintiffs say the sanctity of Romero will not be complete until those who took part in his murder are brought to justice.
The judge should issue a formal request for Interpol to locate and deport Captain Álvaro Saravia. That is one of the demands being made. Another is to take steps to reconstruct the crime in which Monsignor Romero was killed.
Although there is joy at the canonization of Monsignor Romero on October 14th, the impunity enjoyed by his murderers leaves an unpaid debt of justice and reparations.
Thousands of supporters of the Nicaraguan president, Daniel Ortega, have marched in Managua to support their president. The pro-Ortega Sandinistas accused the opposition of being part of a foreign-backed coup to unseat Ortega and lambasted them as terrorists.
I am marching to call for justice against the terrorists, to fight for and demand that those terrorists be punished, those who killed our police. Also for there to be peace like we had before, a peace which united Nicaraguans. People are demanding this, for the terrorists to stop bothering us.
Venezuela's foreign minister has criticized what he called interference in his country by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. After meeting the Chilean president on Wednesday, Merkel offered German support for a regional initiative on Venezuela. In a series of tweets, Jorge Arias lamented the German leader's subordination to the Trump administration and its desire to impose a blockade on Venezuela. He demanded that the German government respect Venezuela's sovereignty. If Germany wants to help, he added, it should use its influence to help lift the economic measures against the Venezuelan people. So far, close to 8,000 citizens have taken advantage of the Return to the Homeland Plan. The initiative seeks to bring Venezuelans safely home from the vulnerable situations that they've found themselves in neighboring countries.
At 6:30 in the afternoon, the fifth flight from Peru arrived with the 94 Venezuelans who decided to leave the country. They faced challenges integrating into society there, and many had had negative experiences just for being Venezuelan.
A lot of discrimination. We were humiliated. Some kids spat on my sons. That was a trigger to return to my country.
Xenophobia is the main reason for these people returning, who admit they were sold on an idea promoted by social networks and in the media.
A lot of racism against Venezuelans. I couldn't get a decent job unless I was working in a market carrying 120 kilo bags. I should have never left the country. Never.
Abuse, hatred and false promises, the experiences listed by some of these Venezuelans who today are thankful for a new opportunity to return to their hometowns, to work, move forward and recover their citizenship.
A lot of NGOs trick you. They want you to stay in Peru under false hope. They don't want you to see all the positive things that the Venezuelan government is doing for us. A terrible experience.
Last August, the Return to the Homeland Plan was created by the Venezuelan government. It established routes for the voluntary return of migrants who don't have the means to get home alone. Upon their return home, the program welcomes all of the repatriates back into the country's social programs.
University students have marched throughout Colombia to protest against the budget crisis. Private universities, the Center Workers Union, and the National Indigenous Organization were protesting against the financial situation. According to Jennifer Pederasa, a representative of the National University, the institution's budget deficit exceeds $6 million. Our correspondent in Bogota, Paula Fernandez, has more.
Teachers and students' movements from public universities has been mobilizing to demand more resources from the national government. This is one of 5 demonstrations that will take place across Bogota. Students are protesting due to an extreme budget deficit in public education. They want a new budget of close to $1 million and for the government to pay the debt it has with universities, high schools, and to improve science and technology research in Colombia.
Supporters of Keiko Fujimori and anti-Fujimori demonstrators had to be separated out by the police outside the prison facility in Lima, where the opposition leader is being held. Her arrest comes a week after her father, Alberto Fujimori's presidential pardon for crimes against humanity was revoked by a top court. He was ordered back to prison but immediately fell ill and was taken to hospital. Keiko Fujimori has published a letter to protest her innocence after being arrested. The leader of the Popular Force says she was arrested without evidence. She condemned the political persecution of her and her party. Bolivia's President Evo Morales has led a march to recognize the Day of Democracy. The rally took place in the capital, La Paz. Crowds gathered to recognize the country's return to democracy in 1982 after a period of dictatorship. While addressing the crowd, the president reminded them that it was the working class who fought for democracy and freedom.
Have gathered today to celebrate our fighters who defended democracy. This is an important date, a historical day, the day we recovered our democracy.
And Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel, along with the former president Raúl Castro, has attended a ceremony to mark the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Independence War. Several other Cuban leaders also attended the event. The day commemorated the beginning of the War of Independence against Spanish colonial rule in 1868 in Granma province.
We have fought 150 years and will continue fighting until victory always. The revolution is the same, and the challenges are identical. An imperial siege from the outside, an annexation vocation of a few from within, of those who do not believe that the homeland can rise with its own forces, and as the only salvation, unity.
And it's time for the second break in this newscast, so please stay with us.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Huge international pressure is building up against the Saudi government to provide information on the missing journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. In the U.S., 22 senators have invoked a human rights law calling on President Donald Trump to investigate and potentially sanction Saudi Arabia, while Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said his government cannot remain silent over the disappearance. The Saudi journalist entered the consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd, but hasn't been seen in public since.
Well, we're looking at it very, very seriously. I don't like it at all. Now, you don't have American citizens, but that in this case doesn't matter. I don't like it. I don't like it with respect to reporters. It's a terrible, terrible precedent. We can't let it happen. And we're being very tough, and we have investigators over there, and we're working with Turkey, and frankly, we're working with Saudi Arabia. We want to find out what happened. He went in, and it doesn't look like he came out.
The Malaysian government plans to abolish the death penalty for all crimes and has halted 1,200 pending executions. The Malaysian parliament is set to discuss the proposed bill on abolishing capital punishment next Monday. Until the decision is official, the government has suspended the execution of more than 1,200 people on death row. Malaysia punishes with death a wide range of crimes, from murder and kidnapping to drug trafficking. Wall Street has been trading only slightly down after the big fall seen on Wednesday. Earlier, stock markets in Asia and Europe dropped sharply. European shares sunk to a 20-month low, and the Shanghai Composite Index fell to its lowest in 4 years. The turbulence seems to have been provoked by worries over trade wars and a rise in U.S. interest rates, an increase which President Donald Trump has criticized.
I think the Fed is making a mistake. They're so tight. I think the Fed has gone crazy. So you could say that, well, that's a lot of safety, actually, and it is a lot of safety, and it gives you a lot of margin. But I think the Fed has gone crazy.
Markets plunged after that comment from the U.S. president. However, the International Monetary Fund chief, Christine Lagarde, defended the interest rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve.
It's clearly a necessary development for those economies that are now showing much improved growth, inflation that is picking up and falling into the range or reaching the thresholds, unemployment that are extremely low. It's inevitable that central banks make the decisions that they make.
The roof of Accra Mall in Ghana has collapsed, injuring one person. The mall was open when the accident happened, so there are many videos posted to social media of the accident, which show significant damage to the interior of the building. The country's president has taken to social media to express his concern over the accident and to call for the improvement of Ghana's maintenance culture. Africa's youngest billionaire, Mohamed Dewji, has reportedly been abducted by gunmen in the Tanzanian city of Dar es Salaam. According to local reports, the 43-year-old was intercepted by 2 gunmen while on his way to the gym. He is the president of the Metal Group and has a fortune worth $1.5 billion US. And now let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines around the world.
U.S. astronaut Nick Hague and Russian cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin, who survived emergency landing, are undergoing medical tests. The Soyuz spacecraft made an emergency landing in central Kazakhstan after its booster rockets failed in midair en route to the International Space Station. A dozen of activists have been boycotting the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund in Indonesia over projects said to violate people's rights and favor the elite. The protesters gathered at the Bali International Convention Center, where IMF and World Bank officials met. The activists highlighted a case in the Philippines where the IMF and World Bank funded rural development programs displaced indigenous people.
Projects of IMF and World Bank have been killing our people.
They're taking the lands from our indigenous people, and we want those voices to be heard. And here in Indonesia, we expected democracy. We expected a lot of support, both by the locals, even from the IMF World Bank, but that's not happening.
Cyclone Titley, with winds up to 165 km per hour, made landfall on the east coast of India. The town of Gopalpur was at the center of the cyclone, which destroyed huts, twisted trees, and cut power lines, leaving thousands without electricity. At least 300,000 people had been evacuated from the low-lying areas of the region.
And finally, second-hand bookstores are experiencing a rebirth in Iraq. In the ancient city of Najaf, poetry and philosophy books compete on the shelves with economic textbooks, the Quran, and other theological tomes. Dozens of bookshops fill the city's Hawesh market, where crowds of religious students mix with poetry lovers. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisirtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisir English, I'm Suni Gray. Thank you for watching.